My name is Cleo, and I just turned 35 last month. What was supposed to be a joyful 65th birthday celebration for my mother turned into the day that changed everything. As I watched Mom blow out her candles, my phone vibrated. It was Sophie, my 10-year-old daughter, her voice trembling. "Mom, get out of the house right now." My heart stopped. "What happened?" she whispered. "Just get out, please." Despite my confusion, something in her voice made me obey. Let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. If this story resonates with you, hit that like button and subscribe to hear more stories of survival and strength. Trust me, you'll want to know how this unfolds. Before that fateful day, I believed I had the perfect life. Jack and I had been married for 12 years, building what I thought was an unshakable foundation. We met in college, both ambitious marketing students with big dreams. He was charming, focused, and seemed to adore everything about me. After graduation, we both landed jobs at competing agencies, a friendly rivalry that kept our dinner conversations lively and passionate. When Sophie came along 2 years into our marriage, Jack transitioned into a doting father. He would spend hours building elaborate pillow forts with her, teaching her to ride a bike and reading her stories before bed. I remember watching them together and feeling overwhelmed by gratitude for the family we had created. My career took off faster than Jack's. I climbed the corporate ladder at Meridian Marketing, eventually becoming their youngest female executive director. Jack expressed pride in my accomplishments, though I occasionally caught glimpses of something else in his eyes when I shared news of a promotion or bonus. I dismissed it as my imagination. Jack's family welcomed me warmly from the beginning. His mother, Martha, was particularly affectionate, always calling me the daughter she never had, despite having an actual daughter, Diana. Martha was a commanding presence, a retired school principal who still carried that authoritative air. She hosted weekly Sunday dinners at her sprawling suburban home, insisting the entire family attend without exception. Diana, Jack's younger sister by 3 years, initially seemed shy but friendly. She worked as a financial advisor and was often the source of investment advice for the family. Diana remained single, dedicating herself to her career and to the family business dealings. I always sensed a special bond between her and Jack, built on shared childhood memories and inside jokes I could never fully access. My mother, Eleanor, had lived across the country for most of my marriage, only visiting on major holidays and occasionally for Sophie's birthdays. But after my father died of a sudden heart attack last year, she decided to sell their house and move closer to us. She purchased a modest single-story home just 20 minutes from our place, excited to be an active presence in Sophie's life. The dynamics shifted subtly after Eleanor's arrival. Martha, who had dominated all family gatherings and decisions until then, suddenly had competition for the role of family matriarch. The tension manifested in small ways at first, Martha questioning Eleanor's recipes during holiday preparations. Eleanor commenting on Martha's outdated parenting advice, both women buying Sophie similar gifts, and then asking her which she preferred. As my work responsibilities increased, I decided to hire help at home. Nancy came, highly recommended by a colleague, a kind woman in her 50s with grown children of her own. She picked Sophie up from school, prepared dinner, and kept the house in order until I returned from work. Jack initially objected to the expense, but relented when I pointed out how much smoother our household ran with her help. Sophie blossomed into a perceptive, thoughtful child with an uncanny ability to read the emotions of everyone around her. She inherited my dark curls and Jack's bright blue eyes, a combination that drew compliments wherever we went. More impressive than her appearance was her intuition. She often asked questions that cut straight to the heart of matters, making adults around her shift uncomfortably. "Why does Grandma Martha look angry when Nana Eleanor talks?" she once asked loudly during a family dinner, creating an awkward silence. I began noticing subtle changes in Jack's behavior toward my mother. He became impatient with her stories, checking his phone when she spoke, making excuses to leave the room. Martha and Diana followed his lead, often exchanging glances when Eleanor shared her opinions on anything from politics to parenting. When Eleanor suggested hosting Sunday dinners occasionally to give Martha a break, Jack firmly rejected the idea, insisting his mother would be offended. Besides, he added, "Your mother's place is too small for everyone." The comment stung, and I saw the hurt flash across Eleanor's face before she composed herself and agreed. The first time Martha criticized my parenting choices in front of Sophie, Jack remained silent. When I confronted him later, he shrugged it off. Mom raised 2 successful kids. She knows what she's talking about. His dismissal left me feeling isolated, caught between defending my choices and maintaining family harmony. As months passed, I noticed Jack spending more time with his mother and sister, having lunch meetings that he vaguely described as family business. When I asked to join, he always had a reason why it wasn't necessary. Just boring financial stuff, Cleo. Nothing you'd be interested in. The condescension in his tone was new, and it bothered me more than I admitted. Despite these undercurrents, I convinced myself we were a normal family, with normal tensions. I focused on my career, my daughter, and maintaining peace between the grandmothers. The warning signs were there, but I was too busy balancing everything to connect the dots. That's the thing about betrayal. It often grows in the shadow of trust, invisible until the moment it can no longer be denied. The first clear sign that something was seriously wrong came the night before my mother's birthday. I had spent weeks planning a special celebration for Eleanor, ordering her favorite lemon raspberry cake from the bakery across town, arranging for her closest friends to attend, and even hiring a pianist to play the classical music she loved. "I don't think we should go tomorrow," Jack announced casually as we prepared for bed. He was flipping through emails on his phone, not even looking at me, as he dropped this bombshell. "What are you talking about?" I stopped mid-motion, my face cream forgotten in my hand. "It's Mom's 65th birthday. We've been planning this for weeks." Jack sighed as if I were being unreasonable. "Something's come up with my family. Diana needs our support with a potential investment opportunity. Time-sensitive stuff." "You can't be serious," I said, struggling to keep my voice down so Sophie wouldn't hear us arguing. "This is important to my mother, Jack. She's been looking forward to having everyone together." "Your mother will have other birthdays," he replied dismissively. "This opportunity might not come around again." The coldness in his voice shocked me. This wasn't the man I married. We argued for nearly an hour before he reluctantly agreed to make an appearance at the party, though he insisted on bringing Martha and Diana along. That night I couldn't sleep. Around 2 a.m, I went downstairs for a glass of water and noticed Jack's phone lighting up on the kitchen counter. I had never been the type to snoop, but something compelled me to look. A text message from Diana was visible on the screen. Is she suspecting anything? We need to move forward before E figures it out. My stomach clenched. I picked up the phone, hesitated, then put it down without opening the message. Who was E. Eleanor? And what wasn't I supposed to suspect? I told myself I was overreacting, that the message could be about anything. The following morning, I checked our joint bank account while Jack was in the shower. Something I hadn't done in months, since we had a system where he handled most of the finances. My blood ran cold when I discovered a withdrawal of $50,000 made 3 days earlier. There was no note, no explanation, and Jack hadn't mentioned anything about moving such a large sum. Later that week, Sophie came to me with something that should have been a much louder alarm bell. "Mom, I heard Dad and Nana talking about Grandma Eleanor's house," she said while I helped her with homework. "They were in Dad's office, and they didn't know I was in the hallway." "What did they say, sweetie?" I asked, trying to sound casual. Sophie frowned, concentrating on remembering. Dad said something like, "The old lady won't know what hit her," and Nana laughed. It sounded mean, Mom. Then they saw me and stopped talking. I reassured Sophie that adults sometimes have complicated conversations that can sound strange to children, but internally my concerns deepened. That evening I asked Jack about it directly. His face darkened briefly before he forced a laugh. "Sophie must have misunderstood," he said. "Mother and I were discussing a surprise for Eleanor. Kids get things mixed up all the time." I wanted to believe him, but his explanation felt hollow. A few days later, Nancy pulled me aside when I got home from work. "Mrs. Wilson, there's something you should know," she said in a low voice, glancing around to ensure Sophie wasn't within earshot. "A man came to the house today while you were at work. He and Mr. Wilson spent about an hour in his office with the door closed. When they left, I heard them mention your mother's name and something about property values." Did Jack introduce you? I asked. Nancy shook her head. No, ma'am. He actually asked me to take Sophie for ice cream while they talked. Said it was boring business stuff. The echo of Jack's dismissive phrase from before sent a chill through me. That night, after Jack fell asleep, I did something I had never done before. I went through his desk drawers searching for any clue to explain the growing knot of dread in my stomach. In the back of his filing cabinet, I found a folder labeled Eleanor P. Inside was a preliminary real estate assessment of my mother's new home, along with what appeared to be draft power of attorney documents that hadn't been signed. Why would Jack have these papers? My mother had never mentioned wanting to give anyone power of attorney, especially not Jack. She was in excellent health, both physically and mentally. The next disturbing incident occurred at a family dinner at Martha's house. As we cleared the dishes, I overheard Martha speaking to Jack in the kitchen. Eleanor's becoming quite forgetful, don't you think? She said. Just yesterday at the supermarket, she couldn't remember where she parked her car. It's concerning at her age. Mom's fine, I interjected, walking into the kitchen with a stack of plates. She's always been absent-minded about small things, even when she was younger. Martha and Jack exchanged a look I couldn't interpret. Denial doesn't help anyone, Martha said with false sweetness. Early intervention is key with dementia. Perhaps she shouldn't be living alone. My mother doesn't have dementia, I said, firmly feeling defensive. Her doctor just gave her a clean bill of health last month, including a cognitive assessment. Doctors can miss things, Diana chimed in as she entered the kitchen. Especially if the patient is good at hiding symptoms. Their united front against my mother felt orchestrated, but I couldn't understand why. Eleanor had always been kind to them, generous with gifts and compliments, supportive of our marriage. What could they possibly have against her? Despite all these warning signs, I pushed my suspicions aside in the days leading up to Eleanor's birthday. I told myself I was being paranoid, that the stress of balancing my career, motherhood, and family relationships was making me see problems where none existed. I focused instead on making my mother's birthday special, determined not to let these strange undercurrents ruin her celebration. How wrong I was, how desperately wrong. The morning of Mom's birthday arrived with a crisp autumn chill in the air. I woke early to finish wrapping her presents, a cashmere sweater in her favorite shade of blue, and a first edition of her beloved Jane Austen novel. Sophie had made a handmade card with pressed flowers from our garden, and a poem she'd written herself. Is Sophie ready? Jack asked, appearing in the doorway of our bedroom already dressed in a button-up shirt and slacks that seemed too formal for a family birthday lunch. She's actually not feeling well, I said, turning to face him. She woke up with a slight fever and a sore throat. I think it's just a cold, but I'd rather she stay home and rest. A flash of something crossed Jack's face before he nodded. That's probably best. We don't want Eleanor getting sick at her age. The comment struck me as odd. My mother was only 65, and in excellent health. Jack made her sound like she was ancient and frail. Nancy already agreed to stay with her. I continued watching his reaction carefully. She said she doesn't mind working on a Saturday. Fine, he said curtly. But we shouldn't stay too long at your mother's. I told Mom and Diana we'd stop by their place afterward to discuss that investment opportunity I mentioned. I bit back a retort. This was not the day for an argument. Let's just focus on making Mom's day special, okay? Sophie was curled up on the couch when I went downstairs, looking pale but insistent on helping with final preparations. I decorated the gift bag for Nana, she said proudly, showing me the small paper bag covered in hand-drawn stars and hearts. It's beautiful, honey. She'll love it, I assured her, kissing her forehead. Are you sure you're okay staying with Nancy? I could stay home with you if you want. I'm okay, Mom, she said. Nancy promised to make chicken soup and watch movies with me. Tell Nana happy birthday from me, okay? I hugged her tightly, inhaling the sweet scent of her strawberry shampoo. I will. Call me if you need anything at all. Nancy arrived shortly after, carrying a small gift for Eleanor that she asked me to deliver. It's just a little plant for her garden, she explained. She mentioned wanting some lavender last time she visited. That's very thoughtful, Nancy. Thank you, I said, genuinely touched by her consideration. Jack honked the car horn impatiently, and I hurried out after one last check on Sophie. The 20-minute drive to my mother's house was unusually silent. Jack kept checking his watch and his phone typing rapid responses to texts. "Everything okay?" I asked, after the 5th notification ping. "Just work stuff," he replied without elaboration. We arrived at Eleanor's house to find Martha and Diana's car already parked in the driveway. My stomach tightened. They weren't supposed to arrive for another hour. "You invited them for the setup?" I asked Jack incredulously. "They wanted to help," he replied, his tone daring me to object. Inside, I found Martha rearranging the dining room table settings I had organized the day before. "These plates were all wrong for a birthday," she explained when she saw my expression. "I brought some of my good china instead." My mother emerged from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a dish towel. Her smile seemed strained. "Cleo, sweetheart, everything looks wonderful." She hugged me tightly and whispered, "Is everything all right?" "They showed up an hour ago, insisting on helping." "Everything's fine, Mom," I assured her, though I wasn't convinced myself. "Where can I put these presents?" Eleanor directed me to a small table in the living room, while Diana followed, commenting on every aspect of my mother's decor. "This couch must be, 20 years old? And these curtains are so dated. Have you thought about redecorating, Eleanor? I know a wonderful interior designer who could modernize this place. Might help with resale value." "I'm not planning to sell, my mother," replied with a tight smile. "I only just moved in, remember?" "Plans change," Diana said with a shrug. "At your age, you might find a retirement community more suitable soon." I interrupted before my mother could respond. "Diana, could you help me in the kitchen? I need to check on the appetizers." Once we were alone, I confronted her. "What are you doing? This is my mother's birthday, not a real estate consultation." Diana's friendly facade dropped for a moment. "Just making conversation, Cleo. No need to be so defensive." Throughout the next hour, as other guests arrived, I noticed Jack constantly stepping outside to take phone calls. Each time he returned, he would exchange meaningful glances with Martha or Diana. My mother's friends commented on the beautiful spread, unaware of the tension simmering beneath the surface. Eleanor tried to maintain a cheerful demeanor, but I could tell she was uncomfortable. When it came time for cake, Martha insisted on taking over, positioning herself at the head of the table beside my mother, as if they were co-hosting. "Make a wish, Eleanor," Martha said as she lit the candles. My mother looked directly at me as she prepared to blow out the candles, her eyes suddenly glistening with unshed tears. The expression on her face was one of deep concern, almost warning. Before I could process what I was seeing, my phone vibrated in my pocket. I glanced at the screen. Sophie. A sliver of worry shot through me as I excused myself to take the call in the hallway. "Sophie, is everything okay?" "Mom." Her voice was barely above a whisper, trembling with fear. "Get out of the house right now." My heart raced. "What happened? Are you okay?" "Just get out, please." The desperation in her voice was unmistakable. "Sophie, you're scaring me. Where's Nancy? Put her on the phone." "I can't. Please, Mom, get out of the house, now." Something in her voice triggered my deepest maternal instincts. Despite the irrationality of the request, despite having no explanation, I knew I needed to listen. "Okay, baby. I'm going. Stay where you are. Okay, I'm coming home." I ended the call and stood frozen for a moment, my mind racing. What could possibly be happening? Was Sophie in danger? Was someone in our house? Taking a deep breath, I returned to the dining room, where everyone was watching Eleanor open her gifts. I leaned down and whispered in her ear, "Mom, I need to go check on Sophie. She's not feeling well, and Nancy isn't answering." Concern immediately crossed her face. "Of course, go. I'll explain to everyone." "What's going on?" Jack asked, appearing at my side with suspicious timing. Sophie called. "I need to check on her," I said, gathering my purse and keys. "You stay and enjoy the party. I'll call you when I know she's okay." A flash of alarm crossed his features. "I'll come with you." "No," I said firmly. "No sense in both of us leaving. Stay with Eleanor on her birthday. I've got this. Before he could protest further, I kissed my mother's cheek and hurried out to my car, my hands shaking as I started the engine. In the rearview mirror, I saw Jack step onto the porch phone to his ear, watching me drive away with an expression I couldn't decipher, but that sent chills down my spine. I had no idea that by obeying my daughter's desperate plea, I was avoiding walking into a trap that had been months in the making. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white as I sped toward home. I tried calling Sophie repeatedly, but each call went straight to voicemail. The same happened when I tried Nancy's number. My mind conjured horrible scenarios, each worse than the last. About 5 minutes from our neighborhood, I noticed black smoke rising into the sky from the direction of our street. My stomach dropped. Pressing the accelerator harder, I ran a yellow light and made the final turn onto our road. The smoke wasn't coming directly from our house but from the area behind it. As I screeched to a halt in our driveway, I could see flames flickering in our backyard. I jumped out of the car, screaming Sophie's name as I ran toward the house. Before I reached the front door, I heard a muffled banging coming from our detached garden shed. I changed direction, sprinting across the lawn. The padlock on the shed door shouldn't have been there. We never locked it. With trembling hands, I grabbed the spare key we kept hidden in a nearby flower pot and fumbled to unlock it. Inside, I found Nancy bound to a chair with duct tape, her face bruised and eyes wide with terror. I quickly removed the tape from her mouth and began working on freeing her hands. They took her. Nancy gasped as soon as she could speak. Jack and another man. They came right after you left. Took who, Sophie? Where is my daughter? Panic made my voice shrill as I finally freed Nancy's hands. No, Sophie escaped. Nancy explained, wincing as she rubbed her wrists. She was upstairs when they arrived. When she heard them threatening me, she climbed out her window and down the oak tree. She took my phone before she ran. That must be how she called you. Relief flooded through me quickly, followed by renewed fear. Where is she now? And what do you mean Jack threatened you? Nancy's eyes filled with tears. He came home with a man I've never seen before. They were arguing about papers and money. When they saw me, Jack grabbed me and demanded to know where Sophie was. When I wouldn't tell them she was upstairs, the other man hit me. She touched her swollen cheek. They tied me up and locked me in here. I heard them talking about setting a fire to collect insurance money before they left. My world tilted on its axis. Jack, my husband of 12 years, had assaulted our nanny and was apparently trying to commit insurance fraud. And where was Sophie now? We need to find Sophie and call the police, I said, helping Nancy to her feet. Can you walk? She nodded grimly. As we stepped outside, I saw the fire in our backyard had spread to the wooden fence and was creeping toward the house. In the distance, sirens wailed. The neighbors must have called the fire department, Nancy said. A thought struck me. Mrs. Brown, I said suddenly. Sophie might have gone to her house. She loves Mrs. Brown's cookies and she knows the woman is always home. Mrs. Brown lived 2 doors down, a kindly widow in her 70s, who often watched Sophie when Nancy had days off. We hurried to her house, my heart pounding in my throat. When Mrs. Brown opened the door, the relief on her face told me everything before she spoke. Oh, thank goodness. The poor child is terrified. She's in my kitchen. I pushed past her gently and found Sophie sitting at Mrs. Brown's kitchen table, clutching a mug of hot chocolate, her face streaked with tears. When she saw me, she leapt from her chair and threw herself into my arms. Mom, you listened, you got out. She sobbed against my chest as I held her tightly. I'm here, baby. You're safe now. Can you tell me what happened? Between hiccuping sobs, Sophie told her story. She had been in her room, supposedly resting, when she heard Jack's car pull into the driveway. Curious about why he'd come home early, she crept to the top of the stairs and overheard a conversation that chilled me to the bone. Dad was talking to a man he called Mike, Sophie explained. They were saying something about insurance papers and how they needed to find some documents in Nana's house during the party. The man said once they got control of Nana's assets, they could move on to the next phase. Sophie's voice dropped to a whisper. Then I heard Dad say they needed to take care of the house today, since everyone was at the party. Mike asked what about me and Nancy, and Dad said. She couldn't continue. What did Dad say, sweetheart? I prompted gently, though part of me didn't want to know. He said we were loose ends that needed to be handled. Then they started talking about fire and insurance money. Sophie's blue eyes, so like her father's, were wide with betrayal. They were going to hurt us, Mom. I know it. Mrs. Brown had called the police after Sophie arrived at her door. Within minutes, 2 patrol cars pulled up outside. I explained the situation as best I could, still struggling to process everything myself. The officers immediately dispatched units to my mother's house and began searching for Jack. While Sophie stayed with Mrs. Brown, I returned home with Nancy and a police escort to retrieve my laptop. I had a horrible suspicion that would explain everything if confirmed. With trembling hands, I opened Jack's personal email account, which I knew the password to only because he'd asked me to check an order confirmation once. What I found made my blood run cold. Emails between Jack, Diana, and Martha detailed an elaborate scheme to gain control of my mother's assets. They had been plotting for months, ever since Eleanor moved closer to us. The plan involved having Eleanor declared mentally incompetent, with Jack obtaining power of attorney. They had even hired a corrupt doctor to provide documentation of cognitive decline. But that wasn't all. Further emails revealed they had taken out an additional insurance policy on our house 3 months earlier, with a substantially higher coverage amount. The plan was to stage a house fire during Eleanor's birthday party, when everyone would have alibis, collect the insurance money, and use it to fund their takeover of Eleanor's estate. The most shocking discovery was a document where Jack had forged my signature on multiple occasions, including on papers giving him sole authority over our joint finances. He had been systematically draining our accounts and funneling money into investments only he and Diana controlled. I forwarded everything to my email, then called Detective Roberts, the officer in charge of the investigation. "You need to see these." I told her, my voice surprisingly steady, despite the hurricane of emotions raging inside me. "And you need to make sure my mother is safe." The detective confirmed that officers had already arrived at Eleanor's house and were explaining the situation to her. "We've detained a man matching the description of Jack's accomplice attempting to break in through the back door," she added. "Your mother is safe and in protective custody." I felt a wave of dizziness wash over me and sat down heavily on the edge of the bed. Our bed, where Jack and I had slept side by side for years, while he plotted to destroy my family. "Mrs. Wilson," Detective Roberts said gently, "we have officers looking for your husband and his family members now. Is there anywhere else they might go? Any property or hideouts they've mentioned?" I thought about it, trying to focus through my shock. "Martha has a lake house about 2 hours north. They might go there." As I hung up, I stared around our bedroom, seeing it with new eyes. How many nights had Jack lain beside me, planning to betray me in the worst possible way? How long had he been living a double life, presenting himself as a loving husband and father, while secretly conspiring with his family to harm mine? The weight of this revelation crashed over me. I had been blind, trusting, and naive, and my daughter, my 10-year-old child, had seen the truth before I did. Sophie's quick thinking and bravery had potentially saved 3 lives today. Hers, Nancy's, and mine. And possibly my mother's as well. As I sat there, surrounded by the ruins of what I thought was my life, I made a silent vow. Whatever happened next, I would fight with everything I had to protect what remained of my family. Jack and his relatives had underestimated me for the last time. 3 hours after Sophie's fateful call, I sat in the police station conference room, a cup of untouched coffee growing cold before me. Detective Roberts had been updating me regularly on their search for Jack, Martha, and Diana. So far, they had eluded capture, though their descriptions and vehicle information had been distributed to law enforcement across the state. My mother sat beside me, her hand gripping mine tightly. She looked smaller somehow, the shock of betrayal aging her visibly in just a few hours. Sophie had been taken to a child advocacy center, where a specialist was gently interviewing her, documenting her testimony in a way that would be admissible in court. "I should have seen it coming," Eleanor whispered, breaking the heavy silence. "There were so many signs." "We both missed them, Mom," I replied, squeezing her hand. "They were careful and we trusted them. That's not our fault." The door opened, and Detective Roberts entered with a grim expression. "We've got them," she announced. "All three were apprehended attempting to return to your house, Mrs. Wilson. Apparently they realized the fire hadn't spread as planned and were coming back to finish the job." A strange calm settled over me. "I want to see them." "That's not advisable right now," she began, but I cut her off. "I need to look my husband in the eye, while he explains why he was willing to hurt our daughter," I insisted. "I need to hear it from him." After some discussion, they agreed to a controlled confrontation. I would be in an interview room with officers present, and Jack would be brought in. Martha and Diana would be dealt with separately. When Jack was led into the room handcuffed and disheveled, I barely recognized him. His polished appearance was gone, replaced by a wild-eyed desperation. He glanced at me, then quickly looked away. "Why?" The question escaped me as a whisper, but it filled the room like a shout. "Why would you do this to us?" "To Sophie." Jack's jaw tightened. "You wouldn't understand. It was business." "Business," I repeated incredulously. "Trying to have your own daughter and her nanny caught in a house fire is business." "They weren't supposed to be there," he snapped. "You were supposed to bring Sophie to the party. The plan was for everyone to be at Eleanor's house when it happened." The casual way he admitted to arson made my stomach turn. And what about the plan for my mother, having her declared incompetent, stealing her house? Jack's expression hardened. "Your mother is sitting on prime real estate with development potential worth millions. All she needed to do was sign it over to us, but she refused. Said she wanted to leave it to you and Sophie." His voice turned bitter. "After everything my family did for you, you still put your mother first." "What your family did for me?" I echoed in disbelief. "We welcomed you in, made you part of our business. And how did you repay us? By bringing your mother to town, letting her interfere with our family dynamics, poisoning Sophie against us." Each word revealed a person I didn't recognize. This man who had shared my bed and helped raise our child was a stranger. "The financial problems started years ago," he continued, a note of desperation entering his voice. "Diana made some investments that didn't pan out. We needed capital. Your mother's property was our way out. So you decided to steal from her, from me, from our daughter." "It wasn't stealing," he insisted. "It was redistributing family assets. Everything would have stayed in the family." "Your family, not ours," I corrected him. "And what about Sophie? She heard you call her a loose end, Jack. Your own daughter." For the first time, a flicker of shame crossed his face. I never would have hurt Sophie. That was Mike talking, not me. "But you brought him to our house. You let him hit Nancy. You were going to let him deal with this loose end while you established your alibi at the party." My voice shook with rage. Jack had no response to that. Shortly after, I was taken to another room where Martha sat alone, her regal posture intact despite the circumstances. Unlike her son, she showed no remorse. "You were never good enough for him," she said as soon as I entered. "A social climber from a nothing family. We had plans for Jack to marry into the Hendersons. They have real connections." "So this was revenge for marrying your son?" I asked, incredulous. "This was business," she replied, echoing Jack. "Eleanor's property sits at the edge of a development zone that my family has been investing in for 20 years. With her lot, we could have completed a package deal worth tens of millions. But she refused to sell, even when we offered fair market value. So you decided to take it by force instead." Martha's eyes narrowed. "We decided to expedite an inevitable outcome. Eleanor is getting older. Eventually she would need assisted living. We were simply accelerating the timeline and ensuring the property stayed under family control." "My family," I corrected, "not yours." "Please," Martha scoffed. "You've always been temporary in our eyes, Cleo." A phase Jack needed to outgrow. Diana and I simply helped him see that faster. The casual cruelty in her words stunned me into silence. My final confrontation was with Diana, perhaps the most unsettling of all. Unlike Jack's desperation, or Martha's cold calculation, Diana displayed an almost childish resentment. "You took everything from me," she spat when I entered the room. "Jack was my best friend, my partner in everything. Then you came along with your perfect hair and your perfect career, and suddenly I was pushed aside. We've been married for 12 years, Diana, I said quietly. At what point were you going to accept that he had his own life? He was miserable with you, she insisted. Always complaining about how you put your career first, how you didn't understand the family business, how you were turning Sophie into a mini version of yourself instead of letting her be part of our legacy. Each word was designed to wound, and they hit their mark. Had Jack really said those things about me? About our daughter? So you decided to commit fraud, arson, and attempted murder, as what? Family therapy. I asked, sarcastically fighting to maintain my composure. Diana leaned forward, her eyes gleaming with malice. We decided to take back what was ours. Jack was ours before he was yours. Sophie should have been raised with our values, not yours. And that house, that money should have gone towards securing the Wilson family future, not supporting your mother's independent living fantasy. The interviews left me shaken to my core. These people whom I had broken bread with every Sunday for years had been plotting against my family the entire time. The depth of their resentment, the coldness with which they discussed potentially harming my child, left me feeling hollow and violated in a way I couldn't articulate. When I was finally reunited with Eleanor and Sophie at a hotel where the police had arranged for us to stay, the reality of our situation hit me fully. Our house was now a crime scene. Our family was shattered. And Sophie, my bright, brave girl, had witnessed a betrayal no child should ever have to face. That night, as Sophie finally fell into an exhausted sleep between Eleanor and me in the hotel bed, my mother whispered, "I'm so sorry, Cleo. If I hadn't moved here, none of this would have happened." "No, Mom," I said firmly. "They would have found another target, another scheme. The problem was never you. It was that I married into a family of predators and was too blind to see it." Eleanor's eyes filled with tears. "What will you do now? Jack will try to fight for custody, you know. Martha will hire the best lawyers." The thought sent a chill through me. Despite everything, would the courts still grant Jack access to Sophie? The legal battle ahead loomed like a dark cloud, threatening the small sense of safety we'd managed to establish. "I don't know," I admitted. "But I know I'll fight with everything I have. They've taken enough from us." As I lay awake listening to my daughter's steady breathing, I wondered how we would rebuild from here. The foundation of my life had been revealed as a carefully constructed lie. My marriage, my sense of family, my financial security, all gone in the span of a single afternoon. The weight of uncertainty pressed down on me until it became difficult to breathe. How would I protect Sophie from the trauma of testifying against her father? How would I shield my mother from Martha's vengeance? How would I ever trust anyone again? For the first time since the nightmare began, I allowed myself to cry silently in the darkness, tears streaming into the unfamiliar hotel pillow as I mourned the life I thought I had. The morning after our world imploded, I awoke with a clarity and resolve that surprised even me. While Sophie and Eleanor still slept, I made 3 phone calls that would change the trajectory of our future. The first was to Lisa Hoffman, a formidable divorce attorney I had met at a company function years earlier. Her reputation for handling high-conflict cases involving financial fraud was legendary in legal circles. "They've already started moving assets," Lisa warned after I explained our situation. "And with family members involved, they'll have multiple avenues to hide money. We need to freeze everything immediately." My second call was to my company's CEO explaining that I needed emergency family leave. To my surprise, he not only approved the leave, but offered the company's legal team as additional support. Jack Wilson and his family tried to solicit our company for investment in a suspicious real estate deal last year, he revealed. Our due diligence uncovered some concerning patterns. We have documentation that might help your case. The third call was to a security company to arrange protection for my mother's house and our temporary accommodations. I wasn't taking any chances with Martha's connections and resources. Within 48 hours, we had emergency protective orders against Jack, Martha, and Diana, preventing them from contacting Sophie or coming near any of us. A forensic accountant began untangling the web of financial manipulation, discovering that Jack's fraud extended far beyond what I had initially found. He's been siphoning money from your joint accounts for years, the accountant explained during our first meeting. Setting up shell companies with Diana, funneling your bonuses into investments you knew nothing about. We've identified at least $300,000 so far. The revelation stung, but it also fueled my determination. This wasn't just about betrayal anymore. It was about justice. Jack's first attempt to control the narrative came through a mutual friend who called me claiming Jack was concerned about Sophie's well-being and wanted to arrange visitation. "Tell him to contact my attorney," I replied coldly. "And tell him if he cared about Sophie's well-being, he wouldn't have called her a loose end to be handled during an arson attempt." The friend went silent, then stammered. He said that was taken out of context. "There is no context where that's acceptable," I answered before hanging up. As expected, Jack filed for joint custody, claiming I was alienating Sophie and making false accusations to punish him for business disagreements. His lawyer, predictably hired by Martha, submitted character testimonials from family friends, attesting to Jack's devotion as a father. Lisa was unfazed. "Let them play that card," she said confidently. "We have Sophie's testimony, Nancy's assault, documented financial fraud, and attempted arson. They're hoping you'll settle quickly to avoid putting Sophie through a trial, but we won't let them use her as leverage." During this time, I connected with a support group for women who had experienced financial abuse in marriage. Their stories echoed elements of my own: the gradual isolation, the dismissal of concerns, the separate family meetings I wasn't invited to. Through them, I learned about resources I never knew existed and found strength in shared experience. One woman in particular, Teresa, became a lifeline. She had survived a similar situation 5 years earlier and now worked as an advocate. Document everything she advised. Every call, every message, every memory Sophie shares about things she witnessed. Memory fades, especially traumatic memory, but documentation doesn't. Following her advice, I started recording Sophie's accounts of interactions with Jack and his family that had seemed odd at the time, but now made perfect sense. Her observations were astounding, picking up on conversations and behaviors I had completely missed. Grandma Martha told Aunt Diana that they needed to accelerate the timeline after Nana Eleanor rejected their offer to buy her house. Sophie recalled during one session with her therapist. "They thought I was playing video games with headphones, but I could hear them." The case against Jack and his family grew stronger by the day. The man identified as Mike Levin, Jack's accomplice in the arson attempt, agreed to testify in exchange for a reduced sentence. His testimony revealed the plot had been Martha's idea originally, with Diana handling the financial aspects and Jack responsible for executing the plan. Nancy's role proved crucial as well. Despite offers of compensation from Martha's lawyers to change her story, she stood firm in her account of the assault and abduction. "That child saved my life," Nancy told the prosecutors, pointing to Sophie. "I won't betray her trust for any amount of money." Even our neighbors rallied around us. Mrs. Brown provided a detailed statement about Sophie's condition when she arrived at her house, terrified and gasping about her father trying to hurt her and Nancy. Other neighbors came forward with accounts of strange comings and goings at our house when I was at work, corroborating Sophie's observations about unknown visitors. The most unexpected support came from Jack's former business partner, who contacted my lawyer voluntarily. "Martha and Diana bankrupted our first company through embezzlement," he revealed. Jack helped cover it up. "I've been gathering evidence for years, waiting for the right time to come forward." As the criminal case proceeded, I faced another battle on the home front. The insurance company initially balked at paying our claim, suggesting I might have been complicit in the arson attempt. It took weeks of documentation and police statements to finally receive emergency funds for housing and necessities. During this time, we moved in with my mother, whose house became our sanctuary. Eleanor transformed her small home to accommodate us, converting her sewing room into a bedroom for Sophie and giving up her master bedroom for me, while taking the smaller guest room for herself. "We're stronger together," she said, simply, when I protested the arrangement. The first major turning point came 3 months after the birthday party, when Jack was denied bail due to being a flight risk. His assets frozen and facing serious criminal charges, he began to crumble. His attorney approached Lisa about a plea deal. "He'll plead guilty to financial fraud and attempted arson if you'll agree to supervised visitation with Sophie, the attorney proposed. Absolutely not, I responded immediately. He forfeited his right to be in Sophie's life the moment he endangered it. The attorney's expression hardened. Mrs. Wilson, be reasonable. Despite everything, he's still her father. Biology doesn't make him a father, I countered. His actions revoked that title. Sophie has made it clear she doesn't want to see him, and I won't force her to face the man who betrayed her so completely. The next day, I received a handwritten letter from Jack, the first direct communication since his arrest. His once confident handwriting now shaky and uncertain. Cleo, I know you won't believe me, but I never meant for things to go this far. Mother and Diana pushed and pushed and I was weak. Please don't take Sophie from me completely. 3 months in this place has shown me what matters. I'm begging you to find forgiveness in your heart. I read the letter twice, searching for genuine remorse, finding only self-pity and manipulation. Even now, he was shifting blame to his mother and sister, rather than accepting full responsibility. A similar letter arrived from Martha a few days later, her tone more demanding than Jack's. This family dispute has gone far enough. For Sophie's sake, we should resolve this privately. I'm prepared to offer financial compensation if you'll drop the more serious charges. Think about Sophie's future, and what she'll lose without her father and grandmother in her life. I showed both letters to Lisa, who added them to our growing file. Classic manipulation tactics, she observed. They're getting desperate. The criminal trial date was set, and preparation intensified. Sophie would need to testify, something I had hoped to avoid. Her therapist helped prepare her, but the thought of my daughter facing her father in court filled me with dread. I can do it, Mom, Sophie assured me, with a maturity beyond her years. I want to tell the truth. I'm not scared of him anymore. Her courage humbled me. While I had been focused on legal strategies and financial recovery, my 10-year-old daughter had been processing the betrayal in her own way, finding strength I hadn't given her credit for. The week before the trial, I made a decision that surprised everyone, including myself. I arranged to meet Jack in prison, without lawyers present. I needed to look into his eyes one last time, not as his wife or his victim, but as Sophie's mother and my own advocate. When Jack was brought into the visiting room, the physical change in him was shocking. The confident, polished man I had married was gone, replaced by someone hollow-eyed and diminished. "Thank you for coming," he said quietly as he sat across from me. "I'm not here for you," I clarified. "I'm here for me. I need you to understand something before the trial starts." Jack nodded, waiting. "You, your mother, and your sister have taken many things from me." I began, my voice steady. "My sense of security, my home, my financial stability, my trust. But there are 2 things you failed to destroy: my relationship with Sophie and my sense of self. Those are mine, and you will never touch them again." Jack's eyes filled with tears. "Cleo, please." "I'm not finished," I continued. "For 12 years I believed I needed your approval, your family's acceptance. I dimmed my own light to avoid outshining you. I overlooked red flags to keep peace with your mother. I won't make those mistakes again." "What are you saying?" he asked, his voice barely audible. "I'm saying that regardless of the trial outcome, Sophie and I are free of you. We're rebuilding without the Wilson family shadow hanging over us. And we're thriving, Jack, despite everything you did to break us." As I stood to leave, Jack called after me. "Tell Sophie I love her. Please, Cleo. Tell her I'm sorry." I paused at the door. "I won't lie to her, not even to ease your conscience. If you truly love her, prove it by pleading guilty and sparing her the trauma of testifying against you." The next morning, Jack's attorney contacted Lisa with a change of plea. Jack would plead guilty to all charges and testify against Martha and Diana in exchange for nothing more than our agreement to let him write Sophie letters, which she could choose to read or ignore. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't reconciliation. But it was perhaps the first truly selfless thing Jack had done as Sophie's father in a very long time. 3 months after Jack changed his plea, I stood in the kitchen of our new home, a modest but bright townhouse across town, watching Sophie set the table for dinner. Eleanor was due any minute, bringing her famous apple pie for dessert. It was Friday night, our weekly family dinner tradition that had become a cornerstone of our new life. The criminal proceedings had concluded with Jack, sentenced to 8 years for fraud, attempted arson, and conspiracy. Martha received 5 years, and Diana 6, with additional financial penalties that effectively dismantled the Wilson family's business empire. The civil case resulted in significant financial restitution that helped us rebuild our lives, though the emotional damage would take much longer to repair. Jack had kept his word about not forcing contact with Sophie. He sent letters every 2 weeks, which I gave to her therapist. Some Sophie chose to read, others she set aside for maybe someday. It was entirely her choice. One small piece of control returned to her after so much had been taken away. My phone buzzed with a message from Martha's attorney, the 3rd this month. Since her incarceration, Martha had become increasingly desperate to re-establish contact, sending messages through various channels despite the restraining order. Mrs. Wilson, my client simply wants to apologize in person. Surely, after all this time, you can find it in your heart to allow a grandmother to express remorse to her grandchild. I deleted the message without responding. Martha's version of an apology always included justification. She did it for the family, for financial security, because she thought Eleanor was taking advantage of us. Never a clean acknowledgement of the harm she had caused, or the lives she had nearly destroyed. The doorbell rang, and Sophie raced to answer it. "Nana's here," she called out, her voice lighter than it had been in months. Eleanor entered carrying her pie and a small potted plant, another addition to the indoor garden we were cultivating together. At 66, she looked younger than she had a year ago, the stress of being gaslighted and targeted now behind her. "I brought that herb you wanted for the kitchen window," she announced, setting down her offerings. "And Nancy called to say she'll stop by after dinner to drop off those books Sophie asked about." Nancy had become a permanent fixture in our lives, not as an employee, but as a friend and surrogate family member. After recovering from her injuries, she had started a small bookkeeping business, often bringing work to our house so she could spend time with Sophie while I was at the office. As we settled around the table, I took a moment to appreciate how far we had come. The first weeks after the arrests had been the darkest of my life. Each day brought new revelations of betrayal, new financial complications, new fears about the future. There were nights I lay awake wondering if we would ever feel safe again, if Sophie would ever trust anyone after what her father had done, if I would ever stop looking over my shoulder. The turning point came unexpectedly through Sophie herself. About a month after moving into the townhouse, I overheard her talking to Mrs. Brown, who had come to visit with a housewarming gift. "My dad and his family did bad things because they were broken inside," Sophie explained with the straightforward wisdom of children. "Mom says when people are that broken they can only see what they want, not who they hurt. But we're not broken like that. We can see each other and take care of each other." Her words became my mantra during difficult days. We were not broken like that. We could see each other, truly see each other with love and compassion, rather than as obstacles or tools to be manipulated. Slowly we established new routines. I returned to work, accepting a promotion I had previously declined because Jack had complained about the longer hours. Eleanor joined a gardening club and a book group, expanding her social circle beyond family for the first time in years. Sophie started at a new school where no one knew about the Wilson family scandal, as the local papers had dubbed it. Lisa remained a steadfast ally, helping navigate the ongoing legal complexities and becoming a friend in the process. The women from my support group continued to meet monthly, now including others we had connected with, through a foundation I started to help victims of financial abuse. The Foundation Phoenix Trust provided emergency funds, legal referrals, and counseling for women and children escaping financially abusive relationships. Using a portion of our settlement money as seed funding, we had already helped 15 families start over, a number that filled me with quiet pride. "Mom, can we have dinner outside?" "It's so nice tonight," Sophie asked, breaking into my thoughts. "Great idea," I agreed, helping her move our plates to the small patio where container gardens bursting with herbs and vegetables lined the railing. As we ate, sharing stories from our week, I marveled at our resilience. The pain hadn't disappeared, but it had transformed into something else: determination, clarity, a fierce commitment to protecting our boundaries. When Jack's first request for parole came up 6 months ago, I had stood before the board without fear, speaking my truth calmly but firmly. Actions have consequences, I told them. Rehabilitation requires time and genuine change, not just words of remorse when freedom is at stake. The parole was denied. Martha continued to send gifts to Sophie through various intermediaries, all of which were returned unopened. Diana had stopped trying to contact us altogether after her financial penalties were finalized, disappearing to another state to start over. "You know what I realized recently," Eleanor said as we finished our pie under the emerging stars. "For all their talk about family being everything, the Wilsons never understood what family actually means. It's not blood or obligation or control. It's choice and care and respect." Sophie nodded solemnly. "And boundaries. My therapist says healthy love has boundaries." I smiled at my daughter's growth. The therapist had become another important figure in our lives, helping Sophie process her experiences and teaching all of us how to communicate more openly about difficult emotions. Later that night, after Eleanor had gone home and Sophie was asleep, I sat alone on the patio with a cup of tea. The past year had taught me lessons I never wanted to learn, but couldn't imagine living without now. I had learned that trust should be earned gradually, not given automatically, even to those who claim to love you. I had learned that isolation is often the first sign of control, that separate family meetings and private business discussions can be red flags when they consistently exclude you. I had learned that financial independence isn't just about earning your own money, but about knowing exactly where it goes and having equal access to accounts and information. Most importantly, I had learned that starting over isn't failure, it's courage. Rebuilding from scratch at 36 hadn't been in my life plan, but here I was creating something stronger and more authentic than what had been taken from me. The letters still came from prison. Jack's handwriting growing neater as months passed, his words less desperate and more reflective. I no longer read them myself, passing them directly to Sophie's therapist for screening. Whether genuine remorse or continued manipulation, his journey was no longer mine to manage. My phone lit up with a text from Lisa. "Just heard Martha's latest appeal was denied. Thought you'd want to know." I set the phone down, without responding immediately. There was a time when such news would have brought relief or validation. Now it was simply information no longer central to our daily lives. The Wilsons had taken much from us, but in the end, they had unwittingly given us something too: the opportunity to discover our own strength, to build a life based on authenticity rather than appearances, and to recognize the profound difference between toxic possession and genuine love. As the night air cooled around me, I made a silent promise to myself, to Sophie, to Eleanor, and to all the women we were now helping through Phoenix Trust. We would never forget the lessons of this painful chapter, but we would not allow it to define our story. The Wilsons were a cautionary tale in our lives, not the conclusion. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges: a meeting with Sophie's teacher, quarterly taxes for the foundation, Eleanor's doctor appointment. But we would face them together, eyes open, boundaries, clear hearts connected, but not dependent. And that, perhaps, was the deepest lesson of all true family. Isn't something you're born into or married into. It's something you build day by day, choice by choice, with people who see you clearly and love you anyway. Have you ever had to rebuild your life after betrayal? What helped you find strength when everything familiar was gone? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. If this experience resonated with you, please like and subscribe to join our community of survivors and thrivers. Remember, sharing your story might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. Thank you for listening to mine, and until next time, hold your loved ones close but your boundaries closer.